tell us about No Safe Spaces first, and then tell us about, your attempts to get it distributed, or the attempts to get it distributed.
Well, I'll start with the movie, and then Dennis will go on to the attempts to be distributed.
I actually wanted it the reverse.
Okay.
But that's fine. Either way.
Dennis and I are very different. We have very different backgrounds, but we do have common sense in common. And I have found more and more, and I'm assuming you guys feel the same way, which is just finding someone with common sense seems to trump all the other characteristics that we're constantly talking about, what region you're born in, or who your team is, or what color your skin is. Dennis and I always had common sense in common, and we struck up a great friendship. We've done many speaking engagements. We've always had a great time in each other's companies. And so when the producers came to us with this idea, I immediately jumped at it just because it selfishly seemed like we could spend a lot of time together talking about a subject that we're both pretty passionate about, which is free speech. And since the time we made this movie, I feel like things have gotten much worse. I think the movie was a bit ahead of its time in terms of what it is, the subject matter. And now I feel like in just the 3 or 4 years since we started, this free speech issue has gone into overdrive. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, a word on the movie and then a word on the distribution. I've said from the beginning, and I'm neither arrogant nor humble. I just pretty much try to see myself in life objectively. So I have said, this is a great movie, and it's not a great movie because I'm in it. Might be a great movie because Adam is in it, but the truth is it's a great movie. And Adam and I happen to be the quote unquote stars, but that's not the point of the movie. I have watched this about 5 times. I have the attention span of a child. And so for something to keep me riveted 5 times speaks immensely about it. It truly is an important movie. It's more important today even than when it was made, about free speech. And it's got movies within the movies. And anyway, people should see it.
I'd like to point out too, just as an advertisement of sorts, there's a Canadian equivalent to that movie called Better Left Unsaid that has faced the same sort of distribution problems that you guys have faced. And it focuses on issues that are more germane to Canada, although also relevant to the US. And so, they deserve a note. They deserve a mention.
No,
so
I'm glad you pointed out. I happen to think that things are worse in Canada than in the US. But that's an interesting discussion for either another time or later on today.
So what was your impetus for making, I'm in the movie, so everyone knows.
Let me just talk about the distribution. Netflix refused to distribute it, to stream it, which is incredible given how popular the movie is.
Okay, so make a case for that. Like why, okay, so Netflix should have been incentivized as far as you're concerned, by the fact that the movie was economically successful. And there are other streaming agencies too online that are fairly powerful, so Amazon, etc. Have you had any interest from any of the streaming agencies?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I don't know. I'll look up the Amazon question. I know that Walmart doesn't sell it in its stores. They have the same thing. All you need really at Netflix or Walmart or any of these is 1 or 2 people who are woke, to tell, we can't do this. We're going to get a bad name. And then, what is it to Netflix not to listen to somebody who says, oh, Dennis Prager. We know for a fact that it was my name that was the trigger, which is an interesting thing, which one day would be fascinating to discuss. Because whenever my name is raised as this bugaboo, I always say, well, can you say anything in 35 years of broadcasting, 10 books, literally 1,000 columns on the internet, plus tens of thousands of hours of the radio recorded, say one thing that I have ever said that strikes you as extreme? And so there's never an example. There's literally never. The New York Times did a piece on me. They couldn't find one sentence. They made up something, in fact. They said Prager suggested, and I always tell people, if they don't say said, don't believe the line. Suggested is the New York Times, not what I said. And then they had no quotes. But anyway,
I've had the same experience, Dennis. You know, I have hundreds of hours of
course you have. I know that. I can't find a thing you've ever said that isn't ennobling. I love your work. I wrote the introduction to your biography.
I had this experience as well, and then I have another thought, which is I got into a lot of trouble and I got out of favor with critics because it was widely said that Adam Carolla said women weren't funny. Now, this is perfect, and you guys have experienced a version of this. I did an interview years ago, and the person said at the end, who's funnier, men or women? And I said, well, I think men are. I think it's based on them trying to have sex, essentially. So they had to exercise that muscle a little bit. But I know many female comedians that are funnier than any guy I ever went to high school with. That then turned into Adam Carolla said women weren't funny. And then they just ran with it. And that's up there with the.
Well, look, it's pretty credible what you say, because my sense is that there's been a couple of things I've said that have been blown up in the press, and they were exaggerations of the sort that you're describing, taken out of context. I think that in the current climate, if you've ever said anything reprehensible on public record, that you will be slaughtered for it. And so if you haven't been slaughtered for it, the probability that you haven't said anything reprehensible is pretty damn high, because people are combing over the utterances of people like you, trying to find a smoking pistol. I don't know if you can comb over things to find a smoking pistol, but
I was at a Senate subcommittee on the suppression of free speech, testifying about what's happening to PragerU, where hundreds of our videos are placed on the restricted list, meaning if you have a filter against pornography and violence, you actually can't see the video. So one of them was, in fact, one that I had given. I only give 1/10 of the videos. 90% are other people. But I have given a number of videos on the 10 Commandments, for example. And so Senator Ted Cruz asked the representative of Google, why did you people could see this on YouTube? It is still there. Why did you put Mr. Prager's talk on the 10 Commandments on the restricted list? And the man looked at Senator Cruz and said, because it mentions murder. And I remember humming the Twilight Zone theme, because I felt I had entered an alternate universe.
So what do you think the reason was, Dennis? I mean, obviously, look, that's got to be a bit of a PR nightmare for Google to do something like that. So it smacks of a certain degree of incompetence to begin with. And I like to hypothesize incompetence before malevolence. So why do you think it was censored that specifically? And then why, with regards to, is it reasonable to call what's happening with PragerU censorship? And why do you think it's happening?
Because, well, I'll tell you I'll answer the last one first, and this will help you realize that I think there's more malevolence than incompetence. There is never an instance in the history of the world, and this is my field of study since I was in graduate school at Columbia. That's why I studied Russian, was to read Pravda and visit the Soviet Union on multiple occasions and other communist countries. There is no instance in world history that is since the Russian Revolution of the left gaining power and not suppressing speech. Liberals are for free speech. Conservatives are for free speech. The left has never been for free speech.
Okay, so let me ask you a clarifying question there, all right? Because, I'm a Canadian, and I suppose, along with the Scandinavian countries, we're tilted a fair degree to the left compared to the US. And so, freedom of speech is in reasonable shape in our countries, those countries that I mentioned. And so when you talk about the left, tell me more specifically what you mean and how you would define that particular because you're not talking about the Democrats per se, I can't imagine, or perhaps you are.
The Democrats used to be, I was a Democrat. The Democrats used to be liberal. The Democrats, when I was a kid in the 70s, Nazis, real Nazis, not people they just call Nazis, real Nazis with swastikas demonstrated in Skokie, Illinois, because a lot of Jews lived there, especially Holocaust survivors. It was a particularly vicious act. And Jewish groups, the ACLU, liberal groups, the Democratic Party all defended their right, because in America, anybody could say anything except yell fire in a crowded theater. That is no longer the position. You look. Why did you get in trouble? And
I've wondered about that for a long time.
Okay, so if you're wondering, I'm not. You said something the left didn't like, that you were not going to be told by the government what pronoun you will use.
We need institutions that we can respect and that hold up the standards that have made them what they are. And if they fold, well, how can you expect normal people, say, not to be cowed and intimidated by the same tactics?
Absolutely. Actually, there were two other episodes on my mind, one of which sort of confirmed my theory about what was happening in your case, the other of which suggested different sorts of motivations. So one of them was a case that occurred around the same time as yours, which was a case of a research fellow at St Edmund's College here in Cambridge, who was doing research. He was a sociologist, a very well-known, respectable sociologist. He had his work profiled in The Economist, in top journals. He was fired because there was a mob protesting about his associations, conferences he'd been to, journals that he published in which other people that they found distasteful had published in, and so on. Again, he'd done or said nothing illegal. That was one case, which again, I think illustrates the sorts of pressures that I think were being brought to bear.
And what were the topics for that?
The topics of race and intelligence.
Yes. Well, the intelligence literature is rough. That's for sure.
The whole thing was so chilling, Jordan, because it was decided by an inquiry that was kept secret. Nobody's going to know what the evidence was in this inquiry. So the whole thing was terrifying. The other case was slightly different. So there was another case that concerned me, which was a case where it was an event for the Palestinian Society, where there was a chair from that society, which the university threatened to shut down because they were worried that the chair might be an extremist or something. She wasn't at all. She was a respectable academic from SOAS, and the university imposed its own chair on that. Now that was slightly different because that was responding to another threat of free speech, which is the government's legislation on prevent and anti-terrorism. But those three events were sort of coalescing in my mind around the time that I tried to change the university's free speech policy.
Okay, so let's talk about the change in the free speech policy. What changes did you propose? And then it took a couple of years, as I understand, to really get this through. And I also understand from James that it wasn't that easy to get people to speak in favor of your proposal, but that it was passed, and we need to go into that, by an overwhelming majority of the people who were concerned and able to legislate such things, so to speak, for the university.
Yeah, so I can take you through that. What happened was this was around actually March 2020, so about a year after your case, and the university had decided that it was going to put through a new freedom of speech policy. This was obviously at a time when everyone had other things on their mind, at least in Britain, in March 2020. They didn't offer a vote on it. They just wanted to put it straight through. And it was a policy which I found concerning, especially in light of these incidents. One part of it was that it said that we have a right to free speech, but we must always exercise respect for other people's identities and opinions. Now, that might seem innocuous, but of course, the word respect being so vague can be interpreted.
It doesn't seem innocuous to me.
Indeed.
I mean, it seems terrible because it just removes the first part of protection for free speech. I mean, if you have to be cautious about other people's opinions, much less their identity, well, we should reverse that. Their identity, much less their opinions, is, well, who decides when that's respectful and what? Yeah, it's just exactly. Weasel words, that.
Exactly. And the bit about identities, I bet they had you in mind when they were saying that, actually. But whenever anyone says, I believe in free speech, but, that's a good sign to me that they don't believe in free speech. And that was the impression that this policy gave off. Other parts of the policy, which may not have been directly explicitly you, but which certainly brought you and those other cases, for instance, the Palestinian Society, to mind, were rules which said that the university could stop speaker events if they thought they would threaten the welfare of students. Notice now welfare is undefined and could be interpreted broadly, and indeed allowed the university to stop events under pretty much any circumstances that they liked, speaker events, for instance. So that was the proposed policy in March 2020.
Why did that bother you so much? I mean, you're pretty young and starting your academic career in many ways. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's a hell of a thing to take on, and it's not without its risks. And I'm always curious about people's motives. It's like there's lots of professors at Cambridge. Why do you think this was your problem?
Well, you flatter me about being young, but I will say that I guess there were two things. One of them was philosophical, and one was more to do with the nature of the job. So philosophically speaking, my basic philosophical position is what you might call classical liberal. So my basic value is individual liberty. I would, in terms of what I do in my political engagement, even my professional engagement to some extent, that's the ultimate and most important value. So for me, it really touched a nerve. It touched something that was the core of my identity, if you want to use that appalling word. The other aspect, which I said was professional, was simply to do with something I alluded to earlier, which was, what is this job for? It's part of your duty as an academic, I would have thought. Academics are normally cautious, as they should be, but the one thing that they shouldn't be cautious about is defending the ultimate purpose of the academy, and that cannot be pursued without free speech and without the ability to question freely beliefs that are held by the majority, also beliefs that are held by minorities, and without worrying about who you're going to offend, who's going to be hurt by your words, especially in a subject like philosophy, and I dare say in a subject like yours, and certainly in a subject like James's. You can't have free discussion if every time you talk about something, you're frightened that you're going to offend the other person and then they might report you and you might get in trouble. I can't do my job. I don't expect James can. I don't expect you can if discussion is curtailed in that way. So
no scientists can, because that freedom of inquiry and the freedom to upset traditional truths, let's say, well, in a really fundamental sense, that's what science is all about. And as let's say, a creative scientist, you're always working against what's established, because otherwise what you discovered wouldn't be new. And you're always going to be facing people who are upset for one reason or another by your hypotheses and your research. So it's not a side issue here. It's crucial to the academy as such.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely.
But that still doesn't explain why you made it your problem, say, when so many people were perfectly willing to remain silent.
Well, one thing I would say was that I was slightly surprised when I wrote. So after the university's policy came out, there was a discussion. What's called a discussion in Cambridge University really means that you write a paper and it's published in the university magazine. And so I sent a short paper off proposing some changes to these policies and stating my objections. And I had expected, this being Cambridge University, that many other people would do the same. Because I didn't think I was alone in being concerned about this. Nobody else did. So that was the first point at which I realized. So there was no real bravery on my part, because I had expected at that point that a lot of other people would be jumping in. Nobody did. So that was the point at which I realized that I was perhaps more isolated than I'd expected. To go back to your question about motivations, I mean, I don't know what more I can tell you. I mean, these are things that matter to me. I don't really care if anyone else is doing it.
And did you face any trouble? So you voiced your opinion and you wanted to modify this document, which had, let's say, politically correct underpinnings. And did it cause grief for you? Were people outraged by what you said, or did things proceed as a matter of course?
Well, it was interesting. So some people wrote to me. In fact, quite a few people wrote to me at the time saying that they agreed with my concerns, which sort of made it even more surprising that nobody had actually said so in public. Some people wrote to me saying they agreed with my concerns but weren't willing to say anything in public. James was, as always, was brilliantly helpful. James has always been really supportive, and James has been publicly supportive throughout this process. But it's because there have been a few courageous people like James and a few others, in Cambridge at that stage, that was definitely a big help. So there was some support. I also had people warning me. So I had people saying, you might get some kind of disciplinary procedure, you might get some kind of investigation. I didn't expect anything at that stage, and indeed nothing happened to me at that stage. And I'm pleased to say there've been no investigations or anything of me since. So
that's really interesting in two ways, isn't it? Because it shows you how loath people are to do this because they're afraid. And we shouldn't make light of that, because this is actually no fun. if you do something like this and it explodes in your face, like it probably took me, it took me a long time to recover from the disinvitation, especially the way it was handled. And my health and my wife's health were extremely compromised at the time. And so it came at a particularly bad time. We had just received news that she probably had terminal cancer. And so this came on top of that. Now, luckily that she survived, thank God. But, it was a harrowing time. And so I see why people can be cowed like this, because you don't know when this is going to explode and when it's going to tangle you up so deeply that, well, your job's gone. That's what happened to the Weinsteins, for example, at Evergreen. And I mean, that did them a tremendous amount of damage. They're unbelievably resourceful, and they got back on their feet. And they were a husband and wife team, so they had each other, and that was good. But not everybody can do that, and you can get seriously taken out if something like this goes wrong. So, but then that ties into this issue we discussed a bit earlier, which is how a small minority of, people whose wrath knows no bounds in some sense can be so dominant.
Yep. So it was in some ways a calculated risk, and I mean I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you, Jordan. It must have been horrific. I mean, one thing I saw happening in Cambridge, not quite then, but a little bit later, was the treatment that was meted out to not an academic, but to a member of the university staff. So we have college porters in Cambridge, and these are people who work at the colleges. Often they're sort of retired policemen or military or something. Really helpful. They do all kinds of jobs around the college. Students rely on them. The academics rely on them. The ones in my college are brilliant. There was one at a college in Cambridge who was also a Labour councillor, who resigned on political grounds, which was to do with his view about trans issues. So he thought it was, there was a motion about trans issues that he thought, threatened women's safety, and so he resigned on a point of principle. And that's his political activity. That's his right. I could understand his grounds for doing that. The students at his college, so these are typically much more privileged people than him. Students at his college formed a mob to try to get this man sacked. And this was much more privileged people. They didn't care about the consequences for him. They just thought, because he diverted from their line of ideological purity. Do you remember this case, James? And James may know more about it than me, but yeah.
I do, and it was thanks to a very brave female undergraduate. I think she was in her second year. She spoke out, wrote a public article about it. A great courage, I thought to herself. And there was an awful lot of resistance to her doing that, but it was remarkable. She got in touch with us, I seem to remember, and I can't remember how the case was resolved.
Did you ever apologize? What happened with you?
Apologize for what?
Well, for whatever you were being accused of.
I never apologized for refusing to comply with my university's mandate. Mm-hmm. I never apologized for speaking publicly about it. I never have and won't apologize for continuing to try to have discussions about the truth. That doesn't mean that I or who I'm talking with will always get it right. Surely we'll make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes.
The truth isn't a set of facts. The truth is an approach to discussion. Mm-hmm. That's what Joe Rogan's so good at. That's why he's so popular. It's not because Joe knows the truth. It's because he acts out the truth in his speech and his actions. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Whole different thing.
Well, Solzhenitsyn was convinced that a totalitarian state could not exist unless everyone was participating in the lie, and that the most potent anti-authoritarian action is to tell the truth. And that means to say something when you have something to say, because not because you're brave, but because the alternative is worse.
Yeah,
and it was Orwell. It's so interesting to me that it was Orwell that opened your eyes to that. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but it's still really something.
Yeah, I know. It's like that book. I think that's when I realized, everybody was responsible. And that's when I started thinking about speaking out.
That's when you started thinking about speaking out.
Yeah.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
And so you made a conscious decision at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why? Why?
Because I knew the price of silence. because like that was a price we were paying, right? Like not even knowing. Like that's the thing, like when people say like, why no revolutions? Like, because we don't know we are slaves in North Korea. How do you fight to be free when you don't know you're a slave? And that's a different thing. Like the fact that my people don't even know they're oppressed, that's the thing. Like what kills me to this point about my father is not like of course I would be grateful he ever lived in freedom even one day. But the heartbreaking thing is he didn't even know life could be this free and life could be this beautiful. He didn't even know that. Like life could be so different for other human beings. I just wish he knew before he goes, so he doesn't remember this life so hard, is filled with the sadness, you know. And that's the thing with North Koreans, we are talking a different degree of oppression. They don't even know life can be this way. And yeah, so that was my time of understanding what happened and started believing in this freedom.